Greetings. My name is Glenn Jacobson. I'm a student at National Louis University, and this is my action research presentation for ESR 505. I was looking for something to study for my action research, and at Thrive, the school I work at, we adhere to the ideal that students should be getting individualized instructions at their level. And for these effective groups to take place, they need to not be interrupted. So what else should I do besides try to find a way for students to become independent thinkers and problem solvers? So the aims of the study were to use metacognitive practices and have students write about their math experiences. And the hopes is that this would improve their conceptual understandings of math and foster a sense of agency and onus towards their own education. The background and rationale for this is pretty broad. I've got middle school students that are across a whole range of abilities, and how do I keep students who are behind or get them to catch up, and how do I keep my high achieving students motivated? Because I could have students working at a 4th grade standard, I could have students working at an 8th grade standard, and those could be two students that are in the same class and are even traditionally in the same grade. So my thought was, is there a way that I can equip these students so that they have the tools they need to bridge any gaps that they would have if a teacher isn't immediately available? So to gather some initial data, I took a survey, and there were 74 participants in this survey. It was really just to take the pulse of the classes and get a feel for how they felt math class was going. Some of the survey results show that kids were pretty confident about their ability in math, and they were motivated to do better. They also felt appropriately challenged. There was only about half, or a little over half, saw connections between math and the real world. But what was really eye-opening was that when students get stuck, they tend to have a tendency to wait, or sometimes even give up. So that was something that really needed to be addressed. How can we stop students from sitting around when they get stuck? The review of literature for my paper dealt a lot with metacognitive practices, and I did a lot of research on John Hattie. Writing and modeling were topics that I looked at through journals and articles, because that was going to be the vehicle for which I wanted students to employ their metacognitive practices. And then there was the idea of mathematizing, which is taking things that are more abstract, like calculations and that sort of thing, but really framing them in a real world setting. And I felt like that had to do both with modeling and metacognition. So, moving it forward on this, I introduced metacognitive math journals to the students. They were called learning logs, and the idea was to create a collection of reflective entries on each student's specific topic of study. The implementation started with a post on Google Classroom. They were given some of the resources to start, and the first one was a think sheet. So the think sheet is a template for planning, and each student received their own planning template via Google Classroom. And this is an example of a student's think sheet that I thought was of good quality. Then each week, at the end of the week, a learning log entry was assigned. Again, on Google Classroom. This is where students should actually be publishing it through an app called FastFig. And this is the resources that were made available and the steps that were listed for the students, which include the rubric for evaluation. We discussed the rubric in class, and the 3-point scale is something that students are already familiar with because that's a grading scale that we use at Thrive. So I did share an anonymous sample of a quality learning log with students. The topic was on Sudoku. I used Sudoku as an entry point that was accessible to all students because really it's a logic puzzle that doesn't even have to do with math. So that everybody came in on an equal footing that first week when we introduced the think sheets and the learning logs. So as far as the results, unfortunately there wasn't enough time for me to collect multiple journal entries before the end of this course. However, I do plan to continue to use this. I did pull some baseline data of their progress, and this is based on their classwork, exit tickets, and OLP, and this was to be used to triangulate the data and find out how they're doing in different areas of their work. And what was interesting is that I found out that students were not doing very well on their exit tickets. So I thought, well, maybe this is a point where students could, or I could pay attention to how the students are performing on their exit tickets as we continue to implement the learning logs. So reflecting, I would definitely make changes to the process and the implementation. It's somewhat of a field test to this point, and really had I done that properly, I should have used smaller groups and maybe even one small group from each class, and then taken an opportunity to get feedback on all the materials I created so that there would be less question and struggle once all of the students in the classes were doing it. So they did struggle with completing their entries. Students really didn't know how to structure a journal entry, and then other students had issue with the app used to write their entry. Also, I think it would be a very complicated process for someone to repeat. So even if it does work, is it practical? Can somebody else do it? So that was a question I still have, and I'm also wondering whether my plan for how I was going to look at the quantitative data would really reflect what I'm looking for. Also, I felt like the qualitative data was good. It was interesting to see the students progress. So my next steps would be really to start with the long-term planning to make sure that I was slowly introducing the new components, and I would essentially keep the data plan the same. So by easing into the technology, I think students would be able to pick up the journaling process later, and it would cause less hang-ups, and then I would have more students turning them in a timely manner. Also setting clear expectations. I think spending more time on the rubric, either having students score some samples or scoring some of their own, maybe with some teacher assistance, would help them see really what they need to do the process well. Because I was receiving a lot of entries like this, which I don't really consider a quality entry. So really the big thing is keep it going and follow the plan that I was doing, continue to implement, reflect, assess, reflect, collect, reflect, analyze, reflect, question, reflect, modify, reflect, and keep my mind open, and maybe even try and streamline as many of the processes as possible so they're not too complicated for someone else to try down the line. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Take care.